Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, and welcome back to Joe on Joe Illustrated. Hey, everybody, it's me, Joe Slepsky, and this is the podcast where I talk about all things G.I. Joe. Specifically, today we are talking about G.I. Joe Real American Hero issue number 59. 59! It's so exciting. We are working our way through, back through these comic books. It feels really good to be back doing this. I want to thank all you listeners. I've had a lot of great feedback to being back on the, comic book front. You guys know comics are kind of where it is for me. So it's really what I love talking about, specifically G.I. Joe comic books. So I'm happy to be doing this. Before we get started, once again, I want to remind everybody that we are supporting a GoFundMe for a very, very dear friend of mine, Sarah Lauber, who is currently in the fight of her life against a very aggressive cancer. If you go to GoFundMe, it's Fight Cancer with Sarah Lauber, Lauber, and you can also find my tweets about it on my Twitter page at Joe on Joe Pod, Facebook Joe and Joe Pod, Instagram Joe and Joe Pod, and take a look at that campaign. And please consider donations, certainly, but also consider sharing it, guys, because we have a big network here, and if you guys can just share it, that would be a huge, huge win. And remember, Joe on Joe is matching the first $500 from Joe and Joe listeners. If you hashtag your share with a Yo Joe in it, we will match it. So far, we've matched $60 from this show, which I love. G.I. Gary V out there, thank you so much, and everyone else who contributed. So please, let's keep doing that. And the first 10 listeners that do so will actually get a Joe on Joe face mask. I'll drop one in the mail to you. So please, 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 please. I went over this in detail last week, and we still need your help. So if you're listening, please share and everything and all that stuff. So, that all out the way. We're here for some comic books, guys. And today's episode is featuring issue 59, which is a classic in the annals of G.I. Joe. It is the full introduction of Raptor. It is a lot of first appearances. It's like a new day on the toy aisle for G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero, is what it is. There's so many firsts in this issue and so many cool stuff. And so much, the art's great. Ron Wagner shows up. Bob McLeod does the inks. I'm a fan of this issue. It's a A to B to Z issue. It gets us where it kind of moves the story along, introduces a bunch of cool new stuff, but it is definitely like looking at a toy catalog, and I love it. I'm here for it. It is one of the absolute, I think, like legendary covers, and it's a cool book. I like it. I like it a lot. So, listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie. It's about not two movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben. And each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show. And before we get started, we'd like to begin with the segment
You were saying?
where we look at things in media that were released in the same month that this comic book came out. So this book came out in May of 1987. So first we're going to take a look over at DC Comics and see what was on the stands over at DC Comics. Batman number 407. This is the final part of Batman Year One, Part 4. David Mazzucchelli, Frank Miller. I've spoken about this in the last few episodes. For my money, absolutely. This is my favorite Batman story. When they retell his origin and they get closer to this version of it or this iteration of it, that makes me happiest of all. I think this is Frank's best Batman work. While Dark Knight's certainly amazing and not taking anything away from it, Dark Knight is that let's break everything and show everything through a correct lens version of storytelling on things like Batman, with Superman, like Alan Moore did it with everything, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which are both amazing stories, taking nothing away from them. But for me, taking everything that makes a character work and distilling it into like kind of a pure origin that then really can launch it forward for decades, like Frank did with this, like Man of Steel did. I think there's a real skill in that and finding what works. It's not perfect. Strangely, he didn't allow for Batgirl, which was weird. I don't know if that's misogynistic or not, but it was weird the way that they reference, although, because I know that Gordon having a son was from an older, like, Silver Agey story, so I get it, but they just kind of gloss over Batgirl, which is a weird omission. The fact that she could be around, or whatever. But setting that aside, it is a very pure, very clean, very updated for the time version of what Batman would be were he coming around in the 80s, and I love it. And Mazzucchelli's art is just phenomenal. Speaking of John Byrne's Superman, Superman number 5, it's Superman fighting what looks like a mummy. But if I recall correctly, it is a big alien. It's Lois goes on some kind of excavation trip, and it's like an alien being that probably, I think, was worshipped as a mummy and wrapped in mummy mask, something like that, if memory serves. But those really all the Byrne Superman stuff is great. They just reissued a hardcover that is, I think it's going to be 4 or 5 hardcovers, and it's going to collect all the Byrne stuff in sequential order, and I can't recommend it highly enough. I don't think they got to this issue. I think they got to like issue 2 or 3 maybe of his series, because it also included the stuff in adventure and the stuff in action. It's phenomenal, and it's in order, and so everything makes a lot more sense the way I read it originally, which was, for this stuff, was me piecing it together in back issues. So I don't know that I've ever actually read it in sequential order. So it was great. So that's a really good collection. It's just recently out from DC if you guys get a chance to get it. And as we talked about last month, it was Legends number 6. And I talked about that leading into my personal favorite era of the Justice League. And it also led into a new era for what is now a popular team, Suicide Squad. So this month we have Suicide Squad number 1 by John Ostrander, Luke McDonnell, Carl Kiesel, cover by Howard Chaykin. Guys, if you've never read these Suicide Squads, this era, do yourself a favor and pick it up. They have absolutely collected them in recent years. It's not as flashy as your modern Suicide Squads with Harley Quinn and all that stuff. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the current renditions of it. I don't know why. But it's not as flashy at all. It's really, really grounded in reality, grounded in kind of a very G.I. Joe-esque, I'll say, view of a comic book world. You know how G.I. Joe is always kind of grounded in reality, with 1 foot in the real world, but then they're jumping around on pogo planes and guys dressed as Raptors. That's kind of what Suicide Squad was. It was very real. It treated the world politics at the time, especially heavily during the Reagan era. Ostrander's a big Democrat. He's a big lefty. So he brought this real critical eye to Reagan and to the Reagan era during the Reagan era, which is great because it's easy to kind of look back now, and it's always easy to look back at any era from an opposing position and be critical of it. But regardless of your positions, when you're living in the middle of it, and you find an artist like Ostrander, or a writer like Ostrander, that can do a running critique during the crisis without making it so over the top as to like veer into lampoonery, I think that's a real skill, and Ostrander nails it with this book. It's funny because Chaykin does the cover, and Chaykin is probably the king of that. If you've ever read his stuff, the absolute king of like lampooning real politic in real time. So Suicide Squad #1 is huge. Justice League #1 is even bigger. This is the Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis, Kevin Maguire Justice League. Al Gordon on inks. I adore this run of Justice League. This is another book that they just recently put an omnibus out about a year ago. Adore it because it actually is genuinely funny, which is difficult to do in comic books. Even to this day, it's difficult to make a genuinely funny comic book set in the superhero world without veering into that lampoonery, with keeping this sense of, no, these guys really are superheroes, but then they have a sense of humor. This is the book that really set that tone. This is the book that showed people how to do it right. It brought in some of the Kirby Fourth World stuff. It incorporated Charlton characters and Blue Beetle. It brought Shazam into the mainstream DCU, even though, he was already in the DCU, but no one really accepted him as part of it. This fixed that. It mainstreamed Guy Gardner. It brought Dr. Fate into regularity. It gave Martian Manhunter the template that they use today for him, which is like the heart of the Justice League. Previously, Manhunter was in the Justice League and he would show up a lot, but I would be hard pressed. He ran the era with Vibe and Gypsy and stuff, but I don't think that's calling him the heart of the league. It was this era that really said, no, John's been there from the start. John is the emotional center of the Justice League. And that all starts here, guys, with Justice League #1. If you've never read it, it's freaking hilarious, and it's absolute brilliant storytelling. Highest recommendation. That's all we're going to talk about this week, but there's a ton of other great stuff. Hawkman has a Superman crossover. Watchmen is up to issue #9. Booster Gold on issue 16. Superman is over in Action Comics. It's the other part of the Hawkman crossover. What else do we got going on here? The Question by Denny O'Neil and Dennis Cowan. That Question series is absolute brilliance. So a lot of really great stuff on the shelf this month over at DC. Now over at Marvel.
You were saying?
First off, we've got Uncanny X-Men #217 with a sweet Walter Simonson cover. It's Dazzler fighting the Juggernaut. I like this era of X-Men. It's not my favorite era, but I liked it because it was the era. It was right around the time when I found them and discovered who they were. But specifically, I liked it because they took Dazzler and gave her formidable powers. I really appreciated that, and I thought she was used really, really well during this era, starting here and through this Silvestri stuff, where they made her basically a laser sharpshootist. And I thought it was great. I thought it was really smart because I was actually familiar with who Dazzler was, but all she ever did was, throw light shows around. And this was the time when they really said, no, she's burning holes in people, and really great. So, and this cover's always awesome. Simonson's fantastic. I love seeing it. You can find this book pretty much anywhere. G.I. Joe wrapped up the Order of Battle with issue #4. It's funny. I was a big Marvel official handbook of the Marvel Universe fan, and I've read them all the way through. And I've certainly read Order of Battle all the way. But I forgot that Order of Battle was just reprints of the cards until, as I started doing the show. For the longest time, I remembered in my head, I always thought Order of Battle was more of a Marvel Universe style take on the Joe team. And then you open it up and you go, oh, this isn't that. It's just some, literally in some cases, bad photoshopping, cut and pasting of the card information into a comic book form. So that's always been disappointing. But, it wrapped up. The Incredible Hulk 331. Guys, this is the McFarlane era of Incredible Hulk. That's right. Todd McFarlane had a short-lived run on the Hulk. I say short, it was probably over a year's worth of stories, so that's pretty good, actually. But he drew the Incredible Hulk before he moved over to Spider-Man. And this stuff is great. It's really great. And it's also early Peter David issues. And Peter David, really, the Hulk's had murderer rows, or a murderer's row of writers on it over the last 30, 40 years. It really, really has. For someone who's probably got A-list brand recognition with B-list sales, he has quietly had some of the greatest writers and greatest stories told about him that, never really cracks mainstream. I don't know why, but between, Peter David stuff, Greg Pak's stuff is World War Hulk and Planet Hulk and all that stuff. The Immortal Hulk that's happening now, the Bruce Jones Hulk stuff, the horror Bruce Jones stuff that was horror Hulk before Immortal Hulk, which Al Ewing on Immortal Hulk is amazing. All this stuff is really, really, really good and playing around with the character of the Hulk. But if you've never read this early Peter David, early Todd McFarlane Hulk, it's a lot of fun. It's very superhero-y. And I believe they're playing around with Rick Jones as the Hulk during this. Of course, we're leading up to that great Wolverine cover. It's just fun. And it's that proto McFarlane where you see all the cartooniness of his, but he's not doing it too extreme, too over the top. So it looks really tight and really controlled insanity. I really like it a lot. And that's going to be it for Marvel Comics.
You were saying?
And now we're going to look at what was in the movie theater during this time. So May of 87. Creep Show 2. This is the one, I believe this is the one with the creeping oil creature in the lake. That was always frightening. Also on May 1st, the movie Malone with Burt Reynolds. I have a very personal connection to this movie. I love this movie. This movie is terrible, but fantastic. Burt Reynolds plays a CIA hitman who's had enough of the life, and he's going to retire to a small town. And like every movie that takes place in the 80s that, someone dangerous retires to a small town, of course, they find trouble. And trouble finds Malone. My connection to this fantastic movie is in college we watched it, and I loved it, but it was funny, and we were having a few drinks, and there's a line in the movie that Burt uses to I want to say he's hitting on the girl, but she's like, Cynthia gives like 15 in it, and so I don't think he's hitting on her. It's a weird, creepy exchange. But it's a great exchange. She says, she goes, "What's your name?" And he looks at her and he goes, "Malone." She says, "You got a first name?" And he looks right at her and goes, "Yeah." And he never answers it. It's great. Like it's absolutely brilliant. And I fell in love with it immediately. So we were laughing about it. We went to a bar later that night. I was like, "Hey, I'm going to tell everyone that's my name tonight." So we go up to this girl and I say, "Hey, well, what's your name?" And she replies, "Susie." I go, "I'm Malone." She looks at me and it's hard to hear because it's really loud in the bar. She goes, "What?" And I repeated it. I go, "I'm Malone." And she literally looks me, this is absolutely true. She looks me square in the eye and just goes, "You're alone? What?" I said, No. I never said my name. I go, "I'm Malone." And then she looks me right in the face and goes, "You're a moron?" And then I just slunk my head and walked away. And it was witnessed by multiple people. And it was absolutely hilarious. So my nickname, a lot of you guys don't know this, is Malone. There are a lot of people that just know me by that name. For the longest time, they would call my parents' house and say it's Malone home. And my dad would be like, "It's some Irish name. What? Who's this Malone calling? What?" So yeah, the movie Malone opened on May 1st. It's absolutely fantastic. We also got Beverly Hills Cop 2 on May 20th. That's awesome. The Chipmunk Adventures out there, guys. Ernest Goes to Camp this month. Yeah, but it's all about Malone this month. Oh, Ishtar, May 15th, the big flop, yet people in retrospect love it. Movie Ishtar. But it's all about Malone, guys. Remember, I'm Malone. And I'm still Malone and alone, but not alone with you, listeners. So now, without further ado, let's get into G.I. Joe number 59.
Now, mass is ready.
Beautiful cover. It's an action-packed cover. It's not I wouldn't say it's like the greatest layout of all time, but it does its job. You know, for a book that introduces, and this book is absolutely here to introduce toys. It really introduces a lot. It introduces the G.I. Joe Slam. It introduces Outback, Tunnel Rat, Raptor. Now we were introduced to the new Cobra Commander battle outfit last issue, but he's in the battle outfit on the cover and the Pogo. So there's a whole lot happening on this front cover, but it is handled pretty well. Like it's got depth to it. The Pogo is launching from far away, heading towards the camera. Raptor is closer to the camera, attacking the Joes from both sides. You see Tunnel Rat, you see Outback. There's a lot going on, and I like the choice of this bright yellow sky. I think that's a great choice because it gives nice contrast to the blue in Cobra Commander's outfit. I have a feeling if, like, let's say Cobra Commander's outfit wasn't blue, if it was, you know, yellow or something like that, they might not have gone with that color choice. But I really like it. I think it's that final piece to the cover that makes it pop. Of course, the cover is by Mike Zeck and Kim DeMulder. Now, Mike Zeck, for a lot of his Marvel stuff, his inker was Bob McLeod, who is, and again, I'm sorry, Bob, if I'm getting the pronunciation of your name wrong. It's probably Scottish, right? Like McLeod, like Clan McLeod. And so, if so, I apologize. I should get our resident Destro, Scott Peacock, on to answer that. But yeah, it probably is McLeod. I've never thought about that. Yeah, it's a good looking cover. I like it. And what's great about it is actually they worked around the square placement of the either the Spidey insignia or the news stand UPC code, because that fits perfectly into the slams, how the slam's drawn. Like it doesn't cut off anything that you need to see in the picture. I dig it.
Yo, Joe!
Divergent Paths, written by Larry Hama, pencils by Ron Wagner, Bob McLeod. It's got to be McLeod, like Clan McLeod. Inks by George Roussos, letters by Joe Rosen, Bob Harris editing, Shooter editing in chief. I am in love with this splash page, and it's a splash page that does nothing. There's no action, there's no big explosions, there's nothing exciting about it. But what does it do? It grounds us in a sense of reality. So it's Fred 7, who we met last issue, and it's Billy, who last issue we saw Fred. He like woke him out of a coma, and Cobra Commander said he's going to fix him, but we didn't really know how. And Cobra Commander in his brand new battle uniform, and he's giving Billy his new prosthetic leg, his robotic prosthetic leg, and we're explaining that it's, you know, he's going to be able to run and do everything that a normal leg would do. That's great. It introduces who Fred is. It introduces Billy, and it gives us this sweet new battle armor. It even goes to explain, half as good as the new suit of battle armor he designed for me. You'll be running marathons before the year's out. That's just sheer exposition, but it's handled really well because he's comparing something that's new in the scene that we're getting, which is the leg, to something that's new to the readers, which is his battle armor, which if you didn't read last issue, you may not be familiar with why is this guy in the battle armor, because we also don't technically we don't know that that's Cobra Commander yet, because he's not it's not identified on the page, but we know what this armor is, that there's attention that needs to be drawn to this armor. And in the background, we see the hints of the Pogo plane that shows up later in the issue. So it's like these things don't just happen randomly. There's also the birds, the falcons that are in the back. Like everything you need to enjoy the Cobra side of the story is included on this splash page. Of course, everything except
Yo, Joe!
my man Raptor, which he's actually not on the next page, but we get to see Billy in action. So he takes his first few steps and he ends up in like a ninja flip with the leg. And it's, remember, Billy, before he got in the accident, he had gone through extensive ninja training with Storm Shadow, but he's going through some form of amnesia, limited amnesia right now. So he's trying to figure out what that is. My question with all of this stuff, with all the bionic legs, whether it's this or $6 Million Man, all the things that they're like, we're going to give you bionic arm, or we're going to give you one bionic leg, is how does the rest of the human body keep up with that? If you've got a bionic arm and they say you can lift a whole bunch of stuff with that, how is your shoulder, wherever it's connected, not tearing out of your body? At some point, it has to have a real world fulcrum. And in this case, so one leg can do crazy super jumps, but the other leg is not going to be ready for that. So this is one of those suspension of disbeliefs, not just for comic books, but for every form of entertainment that has ever given anyone a cybernetic hand or any kind of bionic anything that gives them superpowers. And in this case, Billy can jump and flip and everything, but without losing his balance because one leg is super strong.
Yo, Joe!
Now over to the Joe's side. We're in central Utah. Now remember, Cobra, all that action's happening in Denver, Colorado. So Utah's not terribly far from it. And we see an Awe Striker. I love me some Awe Striker. And they're tearing up the desert, and they're heading towards the Slam. And who is it? It is Thunder, Steeler, Grand Slam, some veterans. They're testing out the new G.I. Joe the weaponry. And they get a visit from, Crankcase and Dusty. And hiding in the desert is our man, Tunnel Rat. Of course, Tunnel Rat was modeled after Larry Hama. And he is a fan favorite, I think, for more reasons than just that, because he's great. He's a great looking character. He's between the bandana and the face paint, the bandolier of ammo that he has over his chest. Tunnel Rat's awesome, and he's been awesome. He was awesome in the movie. He's awesome looking in the comics, except for it's his use of a credit card that gets the Joes in trouble. Come on, Tunnel Rat, don't you know about credit damage? But we find out that they're all on their way to they're training over at Fort Carson. So they're rounding up all this training equipment. So everybody mount up. We got a place to be.
Yo, Joe!
Now back in Denver, as Billy's still working on getting used to his leg, in walks Raptor. There's our guy. Raptor's awesome. So he's an accountant, and he's a bird handler, and he dresses like a bird, and he happens to be a first-rate accountant, according to Fred. I adore that Cobra Commander is not here for any of his craziness. And if you think about it, I'm trying to think if there was anyone before Raptor that fit this bill for Cobra, this crazy, I'm an absolute insane person dressing as a bird and being a part of the team. And I can't think of one. Like, this predates Crocmaster, right? So really, Raptor is the first of a kind of a new wave of more superhero-y, like super villain type bad guys. If you think about the Spider-Man mold, and absolute wackos. And I think my favorite part of the insanity that is Raptor, and I'm a fan, I think it's fun, but the insanity that is Raptor is that he's basically wearing jeans. Like, he's wearing brown jeans. Like, he's not in a full bird outfit. If he was fully committed to the bird thing and like in like a, like the Vulture from Spider-Man or something like that, and he was true, just straight up in it. But no, he just wears brown jeans and a bird mantle. It's awesome. It's great. And I think it's fabulous. I also like that they're taking advantage of this costume, or rather disguise, that Cobra Commander's in, that he's wearing with the ponytail and the long mustache, so that we're not always getting his mask face, that we have for 58 previous issues. We're actually getting some facial expressions, and we get to see kind of how Cobra Commander really is underneath his hood, without actually seeing Cobra Commander. I think that's a really cool thing to take advantage of during this era when he was running around with this fake look going on.
Yo, Joe!
So now we've got this convoy, and they're headed to Fort Carson, and this is a big plot point moment. Great work, really great work on the storytelling. So we open with, there's all of them are very widescreen panels, and we see this great shot of the desert, nice coloring work. And there's a convoy. You can see there's an APC. There's a cross country in his cross country's vehicle escapes me right now. I don't want to look it up. And then the APC is pulling the Slam that they were just testing, and of course the Awe Striker. And then you get a little closer. You see that all the guys that we're going to be visiting in now, they're in the back of the APC. They're all having a chit chat, and we're getting to know Tunnel Rat a little bit. We see that Grand Slam's broke. And so Tunnel Rat's like, hey man, not only is Tunnel Rat the newest, one of the newest Joes, but he's also a hip new kid with this plastic, the G.I. Joe credit card. And it's really a debit card, actually. But the new Army plastic, the card with the magnetic strip that's replacing dog tags. And we hear that he drove into some little Jerkwater Flats town and had his money transferred. That's going to come into play later, but the whole thing is you could see this as just one long camera move or maybe a couple shortcuts on a camera to get to the point. And the point is, it's important that Tunnel Rat used his credit card. It's not a throwaway. This is how he's doing it, and it's also a little bit of a critique on it too, because of what happens later. So I think it's subtle. It's a very subtle critique on maybe credit cards ain't the best thing in the world.
Yo, Joe!
Because the very next page, we see our brilliant Cobra accountant track the Joes using the credit card. It's great. Raptor, again, we get a little establishing shot of the city of Denver. And then Raptor kind of shows him his. I love that he has this like secret computer hideout. I'm assuming for accounting, because like a calculator is not enough. Like he needs this giant, massive data bank. But he tapped into some data files and he got into the Army Records bank at Fort Leonard Wood. Yes. Yeah, Raptor's also a little kooky. So let me not praise Raptor too much for being just a weirdo. He's a legitimate kookball. The thing on this page that I got a question with Cobra Commander is that he says, I've got it from a very good source that the Joes are now a nomadic unit, always on the move from post to post. Question for that is, I don't know how he knows that, because Cobra Commander's been on the run for quite a while. You remember Serpentor took over and they thought Cobra Commander was dead. Certainly he could have gotten it off screen, so that's not a problem. But it is interesting to hear him say that, because he's supposedly been cut off from the rest of Cobra this whole time.
Yo, Joe!
So now our convoy is about to introduce another player to this new action figure game, and we see that Hawk's with the group, and Hawk and Cross Country are looking, and they've pulled over to the side of the Rockies, and they're waiting to pick up our boy Outback. And they say he was dropped off a month ago on the other side of the Rockies with a ruck full of new survival goodies to test under field conditions. Larry don't give our boy Cross Country the benefit of the doubt here, because Cross Country says maybe he got himself losted, General Hawk, sir. He uses the word losted unironically in this man's army. So it's very reminiscent of Gambit's early accents. Let's put it that way. It's driving it home that he's a Southern boy a little too hard in my opinion. But as Hawk is searching for him in his binoculars, he's blinded, and in the blind we get that great binocular shot, and it zooms in, and we see that there's a dude on the ridge flashing in Morse code saying, stay where you are, do not advance up that mountain. And I love that he signs it Outback, because who else would be flashing the Morse code? Like, I guess it's important. It could be a bad guy, but it's funny. Outback.
Yo, Joe!
And we learn why he wanted them to wait down there, because there's early thaw coming. So there's avalanche on the way. That feels like foreshadowing, possibly for next issue or something. But and Outback just immediately falls asleep, because that's awesome. And we see there's an avalanche in the background. Oh, I know why that's important. It comes into play later on. That's why they have to. That's why they can't drive the way they want to drive, of course. And this is great as the vehicles are turning around. What's sweet about this camera choice here is they just plant the camera, and we get to watch this convoy do a 3-point turn, because these vehicles are huge. So we get to watch them navigate a 3-point turn as they're having this conversation about these reports, the freeze-dried food stuff and the survival equipment. And Outback says, "Sir, with all due respect, all that crummy equipment fell apart after the first week, and the freeze-dried stuff was plain inedible. I've been living off the land and living good." So Outback has just spent the last month of Uncle Sugar's money and time just living on the land, because all the stuff he was testing went through in a week. That's great.
Yo, Joe!
Cobra Commander is determined to let it be known that he does not trust Raptor. He thinks he's absolutely nuts. We see here that here's this data printout that Nikki Lee, who is Tunnel Rat, we have his pay record. And so and Fred believes that he was a Joe. So they think that this Nikki Lee, that this Joe is in the area. So it sounds like they're heading to this Jerkwater Flats, which I guess is a made up town. And they're going to kind of start there for a look. On this pickup truck that Fred's driving is they've got the pogo on a tarp in the back, and behind them in another car. Like, they won't even let Raptor drive with them. Raptor's in his own car with all these falcons or hawks. He's got a sign that said baby on board. It says caution, baby hawks on board. And he looks disgruntled. This drawing of Raptor is phenomenal. He just looks disgruntled and upset in a car full of hawks. Like, it's really quite funny.
Yo, Joe!
Meanwhile, they left Billy alone in Denver. And, Larry, we said it before, he's the king of, like, running 3 storylines. And this issue doesn't disappoint. So we've got the Joes doing something. We've got Cobra doing something. And previously it was just 2 storylines, but now it's branched off because they left Billy alone in Denver. So Billy sneaks out of Fred's garage, and he walks next door because he hears people practicing karate. And so he sneaks in and he starts taking a look, and he sees, as he's watching these people practicing, he remembers Storm Shadow. And so now he's starting to get his memory back that he was a trained ninja, which is, quite frankly, a hell of a memory. That's a heck of a thing to remember. All of a sudden, oh yeah, wait a minute, I'm a ninja? That's awesome.
Yo, Joe!
And this is why we're talking about the avalanche before, because the road is blocked. So Cobra Commander and Fred, they can't get through the way they wanted to. And so as they're kind of stymied on their route to that supposed secret base that they thought the Joes might be at, Raptor signals them and basically, pull off the road, I got an idea. And Raptor is going to, and he's nuts, man, because, oh yes, it will be, yes. Like, he's a little kooky. So he's on the edge of a cliff, and he pulls out essentially a toy APC, which looks just like our APC. And he spins it on a bull roarer and spins it in a circle, kind of like giving something to your dogs to sniff. Think about that. And as he's spinning it, his birds can track what the model looks like. And this is the lure. And this lets them know what they're hunting for. And he spins it over his head. And so they know they're looking for something that looks like that APC toy.
Yo, Joe!
And now they start spinning around overhead. So as he's spinning it overhead, the birds who finally they've had like masks on this whole time. He's taking the masks off the birds so they can see. They start spinning and flying in circles over him and kind of matching pace with this bull roar to kind of get the rhythm. This is what they're after. And then he gives them the signal to go, my lovelies, go. And we're told that the red thong, they all have these like leather thongs attached to their feet. The red thong birds fly to the southern pass. The yellow thong birds go northern, and the blue will go the second northern pass. There's 3 different passes. So I don't know how he's telling them which way to go, but that's how they're broken up. If they find them, and whatever bird brings back evidence, they're gonna know which direction the car was at, because we were told from the cops that there were only 3 passes. Meanwhile, Fred's pulling the pogo out, and he's getting that ready off the back of the truck.
Yo, Joe!
And Billy, because nothing's easy in Billy's life, he can't just knock on a door and ask, "Hey, can I learn the art of karate?" He's sneaking into the dojo. Which is really more of an abandoned warehouse. But as all the students are leaving here, he's kind of crawling in through the ducting and along the ceiling, and no one notices him, of course. They say that Sensei Moore is blind. So it's our first time we learn that he's blind. So this is, of course, the introduction to the Blind Master, who we're going to have in our lives for a good number of issues, a big fan favorite. And as Billy is kind of crawling along the ceiling above him, and Sensei Moore is chilling, we hear "Enter Ninja and be at peace."
Yo, Joe!
Now, back in the Rockies, some of the birds, looks like the yellow ones, the ones with the yellow thongs on them, they find the APC and they rip the cloth off the top of the APC. So to the guys, it's like they're being attacked like by the Hitchcock movie, The Birds. But Hawk's confused. He thinks like, were they spooked by the avalanche, whatever. But it's Outback who's so smart to figure out that these birds aren't wild. They're all wearing restraint ties. They're trained hunting falcons. They're bred for size and strength. The only question is, what have they been trained to hunt? And we see that Hawk is following them in his binoculars as they fly away.
Yo, Joe!
And as they come back, sure enough, which ones? The yellow restraints. So that means it's the first northern pass. They come back with the camouflage in their claws. So that means the Joes or the Cobras know which way to find the Joes. So that's really cool. I don't know if it would actually work, but I love the concept. It's a great way, and a great way to make it easy for us as storytellers to understand the functionality of the birds. So they're not just like magically talking to birds and saying, hey guys, go get them, which I think a lesser storyteller would do. Larry took the time to use the model, show the birds in action, like understanding how he actually is training these birds to seek out specific things. I think that's great. I don't know anything about raptoring. I'm assuming there's some bit of reality in all that. Like that is, the whole spinning and the bull roar and all that stuff. It's great. So Fred kind of, he's planning out the pogo assault. He's looking at a map, thinking about where they're at. And Cobra Commander's just like, get out of my way. I'm taking it. Let's go. And it just launches high into the air.
Yo, Joe!
So now the Joes are on alert because they know that something's up, but they don't exactly know what. And sure enough, Cobra Commander shows up in this pogo. And the pogo is controversial. It's an insane toy. And so I think it fits that it's being introduced in the same issue as Raptor, because it is nuts. It does have a jet on the bottom, but it's also supposedly using its legs to propel it like a pogo, like a jumping frog, like a pogo stick. How that's comfortable for anyone piloting it and able to maintain any sense of cognitive reasoning as you're being buffeted by these giant spring legs, I have absolutely no idea. It's got missiles facing in all the wrong directions. It is a altogether unwieldy vehicle. It looks more like a vehicle that should be like used in like lunar exploration. That's what it actually looks like to me. But the way they use it in this book is understandably hard to hit. Like it's great because you imagine if you're on the ground and you're used to either trucks or planes or stuff coming at you in certain directions, and then you're faced with this whirling dervish of something just bouncing up and down and left and right and all around you. That's pretty wild. And that's what we're seeing here. The Joes cannot get a bead on it. They just can't track this thing as it's shooting up their vehicles and kind of chewing them up.
Yo, Joe!
Outback gets the great idea to jump on the slam and use the slam to knock it out of the sky. So he's asking, and this is where you get into the to the toy level stuff of like, does it, he's asking, does it have to be stationary for me to use target acquisition? And then they get, no, it's called the slam and it's capable of target lock on and tracking fire while in motion. Like that's all comic book or toy stuff. That's all selling the toy to us to let us know, like, hey, when you're playing with this, you can use it. You can use it while you're on the move. You don't have to stationary, drop it everywhere just because it's being towed by a truck. You can shoot it while it's moving, and I think that's really great. I think it's huge.
Yo, Joe!
And we see Cobra Commander. He's in the cockpit in full metal regalia, and he's talking about what I was talking about. He wants to finish this before he shakes loose all of his fillings. I can't imagine it's pleasant flying that pogo thing. I really can't. But he's taking shots and at the guys, and it's just kind of bouncing off their armor, but it's still not pleasant. The Joes decide they're going to drive into a tunnel to try to evade him because he's jumping up and down. So I imagine a tunnel should be somewhat effective. And before we go any further, the pacing of this action is really well done. All of it is very clear. There's enough backgrounds and enough grounding for us to absolutely mentally keep track of where all the people are in the battle. You don't really lose track of anybody. You don't there's not a lot of shots for shots sake, like just to show us something cool. Like it's every for this whole sequence of 6 pages or whatever, every panel is used to maximum effect to tell the story of this specific encounter. It's not used there's no flash to say, this is a cool picture. This is what's happening here, and you need to understand kind of how it's happening. This next page,
Yo, Joe!
gets a little crazy. Even as a kid, I do remember not really getting this because it's a pogo that jumps up and down, and now he's in a tunnel. So how he's jumping up and down, I don't know. So in the top panel, he's flipped. He's actually coming at them from the other direction, really, because he went over the mountain and then he's going into the tunnel, which is great. Again, it's smart the way they drew it. In the previous page, you see the tunnel facing in one direction, and then now they flip the angle so that you get that he goes in the other direction. But then in this top panel, he's going in like butt first. But I'm assuming that's to accommodate the way that the guns sit on this toy so that it looks like they're shooting in the right direction. Again, a problem with the toy, not necessarily with the storytelling, because the storytelling is just trying to keep up with the toys. But everyone's shooting at everybody. The APC is getting chewed up. They're trying to get around the pogo. They can't. There's not enough clearance in the tunnel.
Yo, Joe!
And we see that Cobra Commander didn't think this all the way through. They are all just going to crash into each other, and just everyone is going to die in a fiery death. But he turns on the retro boosters, which are those rockets underneath it, and of course they don't work because we'll probably call it a prototype. The Joes use the APC to like a skateboarder to kind of ride the curve of the tunnel. That's how fast they're going. And as they do that, the pogo kind of skeeches on top of the APC and skeeches out the other end of the tunnel. So they avoid crashing dead into each other and murdering everyone involved. But they do get away from the pogo, and the Joes get away, and the pogo gets away from the Joes.
Yo, Joe!
And now we see that this is one of those like, okay, circumstances. I'll allow it. Billy happens to be taken to a garage which happens to be owned by a Fred, which happens to be next door to not only a karate dojo, but a karate dojo that's owned by a member of the Arishikage clan, and they've been waiting for Billy. So there's a lot of circumstance here, but we get introduced to Jinx for the first time, not by name, but a young girl comes out and she says, we knew about Fred and who he made the battle armor for. Your destinies are intertwined. So I guess they've been spying on Fred for G.I. Joe, maybe? I don't know. Like there's a lot of questions I got here. Billy does that sweet move where Storm Shadow did with him, where Storm Shadow drew his sword on him and Billy caught it midair above his head. He does that to Jinx here. And he then rips her sleeve off of her gi, and we see that she has the same tattoo on her arm as Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. Now, we've seen the arms of the Blind Master, and he has not displayed the Arishikage tattoo yet, so I don't remember if he does have it or not. But we see that this girl has it, so now we see this is definitely not just a regular karate school, but it's tied into the Arishikage.
Yo, Joe!
And battle-wearied and damaged, back in the Rockies, the pogo lands. Cobra Commander says it failed. Not that he flew into a tunnel or operator error at all, but that it failed. But he's giving Raptor points for locating the Joes. So he, in a great bit of meta commentary here, and you know this was absolutely based off of the cartoon, Larry writes, Raptor's method for locating the Joes has been proven dependable. Knowing the location of the enemy is half of victory. Come on. Knowing is half the battle. It's absolutely great. An absolute great reference. And a great shot of Cobra Commander in a very Dr. Doom-esque pose, shaking his fist. And so now he says, let's return to the garage. We have the future of Cobra to discuss. What will be next, everybody, for the crazy, wacky misadventures of Raptor Fred and Cobra Commander? We'll have to find out next time, because that's it today for today's episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated. Thank you all so much for listening. Remember, follow me at Joe on Joe Pod. Send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. Whatever podcaster you're listening to, please give me a rating. Give me a thumbs up. Give me 5 stars. Give me 4 stars. Give me a no stars. Whatever you feel like doing, I appreciate it. And we'll see you all next time. And now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.